I ended up losing 72% of the money I put in. I was naive, I didn't do my research, I didn't know my market, I made a number of poor decisions.
You were a great currency trader.
Yeah, maybe I should have gone into Forex.
That's a week later I said, are you ready to go for a run again? You says, well.
Not really. I had no toenails though.
All your toenails had fallen off.
Yeah.
Like the amount of books, I said, I'm never buying another book. And then someone that I sit with, have a good conversation and they say, you must buy that book. And it's like, oh, I'm on, bang, bought.
Yeah. I get and the theory of not reading two books, like don't start another one until you finish one. I've got 3 on the go at the moment though, because I've got an audio book on the go. I've got The Daily Stoic, have you heard of that? So I read that every night before I go to bed, just the 1 page, because it's 1 page per day. And then I'm reading a hardback copy of a book specifically about growing estate agencies, which is a very practical book.
When you talk about reading, I read recently about how kids don't read anymore.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, okay, kids don't read anymore, but do adults? It must be even at an all-time low from what...
So if they're not reading, well, they don't. Computer games.
They're not reading anyway.
Yeah, well, it's not hard to believe.
What are we doing?
It's not hard
what are we doing around it?
It's not hard to believe, really, is it?
No, it's just endless content that we have to somehow muddle our way through and find out the
what you were
nuts and
saying
bolts.
before as well, like about keep adding to your list. The as more of the information's coming out as well. So what you learned last year is that really relevant to your life today?
But you know what I find the most relevant? The things that's impacted my life the most has been the stuff that I've been taught growing up.
Yeah.
Your values, what the old people taught you.
Yeah.
You know, the lessons, the very basics.
Yeah.
Because
life is basic, isn't it? That's the point. Life is simple.
Do you know, if you think about it, that's exactly how we got together. You remember that we first met where we both had like this sort of dream of being public speakers or the ability to public speak. Yeah. And remember that first night?
Yeah.
And he says to me, I says to you, what do you do? And you says, oh, I'm into property. Got a property business. And then I remember walking in that day thinking, oh, I'm not going to meet anybody that's, you know, that I'm going to relate to in here. It's just public speaking. And the next thing, we got chatting, and I thought, actually, this guy knows his stuff.
That's kind of you to say.
And then the next part of that story was, well, it was a few days later, you give me a call. I think the best, the most beautiful part of our story of how we connected was, it wasn't complicated, was it?
No.
It was probably the most easiest friendship or easiest business deal we've ever done.
Yeah, it was very, very, everything slotted into place very quickly. Yeah, I remember I was, because I'd been going to Toastmasters for a little bit, and then seeing you walk in, I was like, straight away, I was like, this guy's not from around here. And whatever he does, he does it well, because you obviously had like an air of confidence, but genuine confidence, because then when you stand up and do your introduction, I got a few businesses and property, and straight away I was like, oh, ding ding. I was like, yeah, let's talk. So then after, I was doing a speech about passion that night.
Yeah, but you know, genuinely that night when I turned up, as you say, I usually walk into a room quite well dressed, always confident.
You were the best dressed that night for sure at Toastmasters.
But all of a sudden when I went into the room and then they started asking me, are you willing to speak? Are you willing to get on stage? It's as if the air started seeping out. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh, fucking hell, I'm actually not that confident. Because you jumped up, other people jumped up, but ultimately we were all sort of bluffing our confidence, weren't we? Because by the time they called me, I definitely thought, I'm not going to be able to hold this together. I have to stand up in stage and in front of, impromptu as well.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing, being on the spot, not knowing what to say. when you're prepared, you're doing a prepared speech, it's much easier. But I did that speech about passion, finding passion and whatnot, and then went straight over afterwards and said, what do you do? You're in property, da, da, da. And you give me a business card for, I think it was the Adore business card, must have been, and you said something about having a plot of land in town, and we were looking for land. Me and my previous partner at the time looking for land in town. And so that was my initially, I was thinking, this guy's got a plot of land I'm going to try and buy. That was my initial thought. And then, I don't know what your thought was, but that's why I reached out to you a couple of days later. It was early in the morning one morning, wasn't it?
Yeah, you sent me a text that, I think it was 7:30 in the morning, saying, Sean, nice to meet you, be good to hook up. And I saw it and I thought, well, let's seize the day. If anyone sent me a text, the automatic reaction to me is make a call. So I rang you at 25 to 8 and said, all right, Brett. And I said, well, you want to meet up? And you said, yeah. And I said, well, what are you doing now? And you said, well, right now I'm brushing my teeth. So I says, well, what are you doing in an hour? And you says, I'll come and see you. And within an hour you were in my office. And I think the thing that really sort of connected us was, we're in the office and you could see you had all these ideas about business, where you want to go, land, property management, buying and selling. But you sort of came with looking a bit more guidance and advice than just doing the deal. What was really interesting was that although things weren't going that well, you protected your staff, you protected your business partner, you sort of came with the most positive approach to being slightly confused on the way forward for the business. So we sat there for an hour, had a good conversation, and I told you what I thought your business was worth.
Yeah.
And you had two choices.
Which I couldn't see at the time.
You either went and tell your business partner and take my advice and go with it, or the second was, within an hour, realize that you're the type of guy I wanted on my team, and we'll buy your business partner out.
Yeah. 10 weeks later, was it?
10 weeks later, we done the deal.
Yeah. And what I look back at it now as well, I was thinking, you only spoke to him once. We had lunch together, and that was it. Everything, the deal we negotiated was not the most complex deal, but it wasn't the most straightforward either. Buying out a majority shareholder of a business, but all the negotiation was done through me, and not in a way that I was having my hand forced in one way or another. It was like you were guiding and supporting me on understanding what I was working with and how and the way forward, and giving me things to think about and kind of let me do the work. So it's like you're sort of putting up on a what's it called, 10-pin bowling, put up the guardrails and just sort of point me in the right direction. And I was just bouncing my way down, and we ended up signing it from the day we met to the day contract signed. It was 10 weeks, wasn't it? 10, 12 weeks, something. It was quick anyway.
But even within them 10 weeks.
But that was obviously getting to know each other, understanding, you guys understanding what the business was, and us collectively placing a value on it, and then negotiating that value with my then business partner, which is obviously negotiations in themselves can take weeks. And then, signing contracts, and it was all done pretty quick.
But I sort of reverse engineered it and thought, I know this business is worth a lot because I've got knowledge.
Yeah.
But what you explained to me and how you explained it is, I just knew you were someone that actually just needed guided.
Yeah.
So there was, it wasn't a business that was going to be mine. If we could structure this right, the negotiation process to the buyout was going to be the time that I was going to educate you.
Yeah.
So it couldn't have been me. And the value really in the business was how well we got on.
Yeah.
You have to go by gut instinct.
Yeah.
So we both must have had a gut instinct that this could work. Both from different periods of our life. You sounded like me 10 years before, young, hungry, willing to do anything, optimistic, willing to take a gamble. So it just felt right, and we went for it. But that 10 weeks, we could have went to 9 weeks and 6 days. Ultimately, it wasn't that on week 1 the deal was done, or the intention was. The deal was agreed, subject to terms.
Yeah.
There was a process we had to go through, and that's what most deals are like that. You can't just, anyone that shakes hands or agrees, it's usually subject to terms, subject to due diligence, subject to what's being declared, being sort of looked into and verified. But what was impressive about that whole process, and if I was to give anyone guidance or advice on finding your business partner, anytime I called you, you answered the phone. So communication. When I invited you to do something, you said yes. Actually, that's a funny story. We'll have to touch base on that. And there was never a no. Everything was a yes. So I thought, well, this is, in business partners, if there's no obstacles, and everything's free flowing.
Yeah, if it's too much work, it's too much work.
And then if it becomes difficult, there's actually warning signs there. But how we actually bonded and got to know the nitty gritty of the deal was absolutely incredible. Do you remember that one?
The run,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I knew like a little bit about you. Obviously, had a few coffees and lunches and things here and there over the. So let's say we're talking about a 10-week period. Yeah. It was probably 4 or 5 weeks into that 10-week period where I never forget. I'm at my little home office in my house in Anfield, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and I was doing something, working on my laptop, and get a phone call. Sean, yeah. What's going on? Yeah, you want to run a marathon with us? I was by far the most out of shape and unfit I'd been in ever. Half marathon. So I was like, okay, well, I can't say no because no's not part of the vocabulary. So especially in something like this, it's a challenge, isn't it? So you have to do it. And but I was just absolutely dreading it. My stomach sank. Excuse me. My stomach sank because I just knew I was so unfit. I'd been working in the office. I grew up quite fit, and I always played lots of sports. But then at that point, I'd been sat in my office for nearly 7 years without doing any sport, just working stupid hours at the office and not doing any sport or any physical work. And so I was dreading it. I was absolutely dreading it. So the first thing I did when I got off the course, was like, oh shit, now what? So I kind of mapped it out. Okay, well, if the date is X, whatever it was, just kind of reverse engineered. I was like, okay, well, I'll go and do 1 lap at Sefton Park this week, and then next week it'll be 2 laps, and then 3 laps, and I'd worked out that if I build it up a lap per week, by the time the date of this half marathon, it'd be the equivalent of 6 laps, and I think it worked out 5.5 laps at Sefton Park was the thing, and sure enough, we go down to Sefton Park that weekend, and then me and you just going for. I said, yeah, just to let you know that I'm doing 1 lap, or
Yeah. I said you might do 2.
Might do 2, maybe push for 2. Anyway, we're on the 2nd lap, and you're telling me stories about how you and Yuri met. And I was like, oh, I need to hear this. So first lap goes, 2nd lap goes, and starting to get pretty sore. And then, by the 3rd lap, I could feel blisters on my feet, like kind of raising. And then
By this stage, we were halfway through the deal on our rooms.
Yeah, we're halfway through the negotiations. So I'm like, well, this is my new business plan. I can't stop running. I can't stop running. And I want to hear what
maybe the deal's over if you do.
Yeah. Well, it would have been for me, let alone for us. Like, and I was just like, this just wasn't an option. But then you're saying that at the same time that Yuri had just done the equivalent of the half marathon on the treadmill. So it's like, well, there's even more reason to.
Yeah.
We can't stop.
He's ahead of us.
Yeah. So anyway, long story short, yeah, we ended up losing track of the number of laps, but we ended up I'd lost track. We ended up doing 6 laps. We ended up doing the equivalent.
We were on lap 4. And we had that and I said, we're actually quite close near to the end here. If we only do one more lap, it's the 5th lap, which means only a half left. I said, we can't stop now. And by this stage, you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, and you keep going.
I was struggling.
So I just kept talking.
Yeah, and I was hearing all the stories about the businesses you guys had built. And that was our proper first chat, really. It was when I really got to first hear who you were, what you'd done, and hear about how all your businesses came to be where they are. That was it. It was on that run, and it was painful, but it was enjoyable at the same time.
Do you know, it was incredible. The whole way through the process, I still have a selfie after we're finished. We found out each other's background. I want to go back on your background in a minute, because sometimes more often than not, when successful people and people that partner and do well together, the backstory is misunderstood, but our story of how we got to where we got to is so similar in every way. So we get to the end of it. We found out that we can talk for 2 hours together, even with being out of breath. And that's a week later. I said, "Are you ready to go for a run again?" You says, "Well,
not really." I had no toenails left.
All your toenails had fallen off.
Yeah, I could feel it as well. Like on the 3rd lap, I could feel like my feet swelling up. I didn't know I'd never had it, but it was my toenails were like so, because I was so unconditioned. I hadn't run for 7 years, so my toenails were like that swollen that the toenails were like the blisters underneath were like pushing up against the top of my shoes, and I was like, what the hell is that feeling like? I'd never felt it. And then, yeah, sure enough, they all went black and fell off. I had no toenails left, so.
I remember the minute I heard that, I says to my business partner, I says, you know what, we've definitely got someone that's willing to do whatever it takes to make a successful company. Yeah. And that's even a story that I tell today, that, what are you willing to do to prove yourself? What are you willing to endure to get to know your next business partner? Look, we've endless amount of stories since that, over this past 5 years since then, about how we've pushed through all types of what happened in 2020, 2021 was just incredible story of how we succeeded through managing properly through a time where the whole world was shut down. But take me back. It's so important that I had then found out about how previously investments went completely wrong and you lost all your money, close to being bankrupt.
Where do I start? Well, I mean, should I start at the start?
Well, I think it's so important, because what's happened is a lot of people have come to Liverpool and made it. They fall in love with the city. Yeah. But so many people I meet have a backstory of they've came here after failures in other countries and other cities. So just go back to the start.
My first step out the gates was definitely learned a harsh lesson, let's say. It all started like growing up. I was playing Aussie rules football, and the idea was to play professionally. I never really committed myself, so that never worked out. And when I knew that wasn't working out, my plan was always to fall back and originally I thought build a construction company. And my idea was, at the time, I grew up in a small country town, similar to yourself, but obviously in South Australia. And one of the things all the local builders were complaining about was never having work. So the idea I had was, well, I'm going to buy houses and just my building company will build renovate the houses, so they'll always have work. That was one solution to the problem. And I got the idea of buying houses from a mate of my dad's who he basically had a couple rental properties and lived on the rent money. I thought that was a great idea. So I had the idea as a kid that I was always going to be working in property. That was the plan, and I was no good at school. So when I dropped out of school as early as I could, I was 16, I think, and started working in the mining industry, and I was earning a lot of money for it. I did a carpentry apprenticeship first because I was like, I'm going into property. So I did that, got signed off quickly. And then I think I was in the mining industry by the time I was about 19, earning at the time six figures as an 18, 19-year-old, which is pretty decent going. And I was taking all that money and buying houses in South Carolina in the US. And it was going well. Like I bought my first one. I went over there, bit of a kind of a business pleasure trip. Ended up having my 21st in Las Vegas with a couple mates. Had a mate who was...
You lose all your money.
Well, that wasn't where I lost it, actually. I earned some in Las Vegas and I lost it in South Carolina. But basically, yeah, was buying like just little bungalows in a city called Spartanburg. And the first one, went over there, renovated it. That went really well. It was rented out to a family. They'd been there for years. Came back to the mines and kept doing the same thing, saving up these big salaries and just dumping it into houses. And it was all going well for a few years. And I remember I'm in the mines one day. This is how sophisticated I am. And I'm drawing in the dirt when I was like on a lunch break. I was just like counting all the houses. And I'm like, okay, by the time I'm 30, I'll have all these houses. Then I'll be set, I'll just retire. That was my big master plan. But obviously working in the mines is very, very remote and in all honesty, quite depressing. So I was kind of torn between sticking to this master plan of buying these houses or wanted to go traveling. Like I had friends that were traveling all over Europe and whatnot. And so I was really torn and I basically forced myself to stay in the mines. Ended up having a motorbike accident, nearly ended up in a wheelchair, and that kind of flicked a switch. I was like, okay, well, life is too short. So I was coming out of the hospital in a wheelchair 3 days after the accident, pulled my phone out and just booked a one-way flight to London and just never went back. And then when I was traveling around Europe and just living it up for a little bit, it was good. The rent was coming in from all these different properties. And then all of a sudden, just overnight, it just stopped. And to cut a long story short, my manager in Spartanburg must have come into some sort of issue because she started keeping my rent and it was happening to various investors. So then the properties kind of were getting neglected, I ended up losing 72% of the money I put in, which, to put it into context, was 72% of all of my savings from the time I was about probably 10 or 12 years old. Because as a kid, I knew I was going to buy houses. So from 10 or 12 years old to, I think when I left, I was about 22. So 10 years of childhood savings, 72% of it gone. And that was obviously a bitter pill to swallow. And
how did you get the 28 back?
Well, it would have been less than 28, but the reason why it was 28 was because at the time when I was buying from Australia into the US, the dollar to the Australian dollar to the US dollar, the exchange rate was at the best it had ever been. So that was in my favor. And then on the flip side, when I finally sold them for whatever I could, I was living in the UK at the time, so then the US dollar to the British pound was at the best it had ever been. So if not for those two strokes, like lucky strokes of fate, it probably would have been less than 28% I would have collected. So it would have been, I don't know, I don't even want to think. Anyway, I basically down on my ass and sort of starting from scratch again. Took that tiny little pot that I had left, and I was living in London at the time, and moved up to Liverpool because I wanted to. And my idea was
just before when that happened.
Yeah.
Because I've got a similar story of, I think I lost 150%. I lost everything and went into the minus. But then again, we're still on the same path. when that happened to me, and the question goes back to you, I made a list of all the reasons that happened. And when I made a list of all the reasons how I ended up in such a mess, actually close to bankruptcy because I had debts that were coming on top of me, all of the reasons led to me making poor decisions.
Yeah.
Although I knew that I couldn't make those decisions again if I was ever to get out of the hole I was in.
Yeah.
Did you make any list, or what were you thinking then? Because most people would have just gave up on property.
Yeah,
most people would just give up on, like a lot of people when they get bitten once like that, they think, this isn't for me, I've had enough.
Funny enough, no, that never, I don't know if I don't know what that means, but that never crossed my mind. It never crossed my mind that I would give up. And I'm not saying that to try and sound like a hero, it's just I always knew I was going to be in property. So I was like, well, okay, just lost all that, but I learned so much from it. I learned so much. I never actually wrote down a physical list of all the lessons I learned, but I could rattle off 20 of them right now. And the main thing is I was naive. I didn't do my research. I didn't know my market. I was nowhere near as assertive as a person as I am today. I didn't know how to manage people. I didn't take responsibility. I made a number of poor decisions, one of which putting trust in people I hadn't done due diligence on. At the time, I thought I did due diligence.
You were a great currency trader.
Yeah. Maybe I should have gone into Forex. I did do some due diligence. Like I did what I knew to do at the time, which was, Mum, can you get your accountant to check that this company is legitimate? Yes, it is. That was the extent of it. So yeah, I mean, lost a whole bunch of money. It never actually crossed my mind that I was not going to continue in property, and just took the money and all the lessons that I had got out of that experience, brought them into Liverpool with the original plan of coming to Liverpool to build a buy-to-let portfolio. I was just going to do the same strategy basically, buy rundown family houses, renovate them, rent them out.
But the key to this one, you managed your own assets this time.
That's the thing. So I had done
control. You had control of from start to finish.
Precisely.
You had your eyes on the ball.
Because I knew full well that you can have the best investment, purchased at the best price on the best street, but if it's not looked after, it's not worth anything. That was the biggest lesson I learned. And hence that's where the inspiration of building a property management company came from. So
this is the exact lesson I learned.
Because I didn't trust anyone to. Well, I'd been burnt so badly, so I wanted to control the whole supply chain. So from beginning to end, I wanted to have control and know what was happening with the management of my investments, because I know I'm going to be in property for the rest of my life. I always knew that. So it made sense that I would build my empire from the ground up, which is a solid baseline of management, which is now well and truly done. Which I was on my way to having done, and then obviously I've met you, and then that's just gone to whole new levels and in all different ways that I didn't anticipate. But yeah, and then now I'm sort of stacking onto that little empire, let's say. I don't know why I did that, but because it's like a building block that it's happening over time. So I learned where to from here. So yeah, I come to Liverpool. I originally thought to do family rentals, and then because I love networking, it's my greatest strength in business is networking, building relationships and finding opportunities. I was out running around up and down the country and all around London. When I was living in London, I was going to all these networking events and just meeting everyone. And then when it came to coming to Liverpool, I had this small pot of cash, which I ended up burning through, and I was living on credit cards and I was living on the negative. I was in negative balance, and that was character building, let's say. Stressful as hell. But we'll call it character building.
Yeah, so we are on the same page then.
Yeah. So I'll never forget the day where I looked at all my balances and added up what was outstanding on the credit cards, which was paying the rent. And it worked out I was severely in the negative. Well, for me, it was a few grand.
I used to change the figures. The bank, because I was so much in debt, the bank was actually asking me for a monthly recalculation and where I am, my balance sheet. So I used to type in what was probably the highest and lowest possibility, because nobody know. You just don't know. A forced sale is different than being able to hold on. So I just used to change the figures and the calculations before they'd ask me, and I realised after about a year of doing this, it didn't actually matter what my assets were worth. As long as I had enough income,
cash flow,
to get me over each month.
Yeah.
Well, then all I need to do is make a little bit more and a little bit more, and eventually, if the assets, some of my, and this is something I know we talked about and agree on. If we are never going to sell, then all you need to do is constantly generate income.
Yeah.
The biggest the common failure we had was the debt. The cash flow is in a minus, not in a positive.
Yeah.
Okay, there's other how well you manage something, how well you what price you buy your assets, return. There's all amount of things, but your own personal assets, if they're bought at the right price, and you don't have too much debt, and you've got really good income, that is never a problem. The problem is whenever you've got too much debt and interest rates change.
I didn't have any commercial debt. With the properties, I didn't have any debt because I was earning such big salary in the mines. I was just paying cash. So that's probably one thing that worked in my favour, I suppose. But then it was all my money that was lost. But then I was in consumer debt when I was living on the credit cards. So
for the people at home now, we own a company called Now Rooms, which has over 800 rooms in its portfolio. Yeah. The biggest HMO business in Liverpool.
Of its kind,
and growing.
Yeah.
We both are proud of the attention and care that we look after our landlords, staff, the operations.
Yeah.
How do you think we've managed that fine line of customer service in a service industry that, property management doesn't get the best reviews at time? And how do you think we've managed to keep such a great relationship with all our landlords?
Well, I'll finish off I didn't finish my point before, but so I was running up and down like the country networking, and I needed some income to cover my bills. I didn't want to burn through my cash, but I inevitably did. And everyone was tapping me on the shoulder saying, "Oh, I hear you're managing HMOs." And I was like, "Well, no, not really. I just took a couple on just to cover my own personal expense." But then next thing you know, I'm doing all this networking and I'm meeting people face to face, and they're giving me their keys. So I was like, well, there's obviously a gap in the market here. So that's when we looked into it, and I ended up sitting at home checking all the agents in town and identifying that there was a need. So then my life became finding landlords who needed help because they didn't trust a high street agent, and nor should they, because no disrespect to high street agents, but they just don't manage HMOs, and they're not afraid to admit it. They just don't. So we plugged the gap of managing by the room, so managing to work in professionals, and providing a very attentive service that understanding the needs of the tenant is the big thing. So, and obviously if you understand the needs of the tenant, which again, I kind of thrown the high street agents under the bus a little bit, but we've taken over a lot of stock from them. And in most cases, they actually phone us and say, come and take this office, because they don't understand it, they don't want to deal with it, they don't really know anything about it. So they'll end up, the big thing about managing...
This is about room rentals.
Yeah, room rentals, yeah. So the concept is you have a 3-bedroom house that's been stripped out and then redeveloped into 5 or 6 bedrooms. That's the most typical model. And then in there you've got 4, 5, 6 people living together who are from all different backgrounds. They're individual people. They're not like students who come and go as a group of friends once a year. They move in, they're friends, they live together. working professionals come from all over the place. So obviously you need to try and match people who are similar age groups, similar demographics, similar, you know, from walks of life and interests and things like that. And when you get that right, then obviously a lot of the rest takes care of itself. So then if you don't get that right, then obviously you've got turnover of tenants, you've got high maintenance expenditure, you've got just constant day-to-day issues, which then obviously goes back to the landlord. The landlord's employing you to take away all the issue, to be the middleman, just like any other agent. And the landlord wants you to protect their asset, collect their rent, and keep the tenants safe and healthy. So if you're looking after the dynamic of the tenants in the house and keeping that in harmony, then the landlord will ultimately end up getting their rent on time and having their property looked after. So
landlord doesn't leave you and tenant doesn't leave you.
Precisely. You can't. It's a yin yang. You can't have one without the other. And then obviously that kind of translates to the more you can get that right, which obviously over years of practice and thousands of tenants, we know what dynamics work and what don't. Mm-hmm. And then that gives us more time to be able to focus on more service for the landlord. But the reality is most landlords don't actually want to know, like they don't want to hear from you. They just want to know that their property's safe. If they've got trust and faith in you and your agency, and they know that the property's looked after and the tenants are safe and healthy and the rent's collected and paid on time, they're happy, we're happy, tenants are happy.
I remember when we got together, we come up with a concept of just fix it.
This was the first thing I learned working with you, actually. I remember previous sort of partnership, we were looking externally, like what do we want to achieve? What do we want to do? What deals do we want to do? And kind of neglecting what we had right in front of us. And that was the business. So then when we started working together, the focus was on fixing every little thing about the business that we currently have and just growing it from the inside out, not necessarily expanding, which inevitably happens when you fix, but just tinkering away and just fixing, refining, developing, improving. And then over time, we just kept fixing, and then it's just gone like this. And then things have added on and plugged in, and now it's just an ecosystem of all different products and services and businesses. But yeah, it's very much like focusing on what you've got and fixing what you've got.
If the tenant needs something fixed, normal tenants have to ask the agent. The agent has to then get permission with the landlord. The landlord has to approve. Awkward landlords sometimes don't.
Yeah.
And the process can last anything from 2 weeks to 2 months. So we sat down and I said to you, just fix it. And we looked at what would the problems be. So if we just went and fixed everything, you might have an unhappy landlord that wasn't happy that we repaired or fixed. But you'd have a very happy tenant because the tenant's issue would be fixed within seconds. But also you'd save on admin. But when we looked and explained to the landlord, this is the issue, it's £50, £100. Obviously, if it went into too much expenditure, you'd speak to the tenant and come back. But most of the tenant's issues are small things that can be resolved that isn't worth wasting admin time, wasting tenant time.
Yeah.
So we corrected and we fixed hundreds of small things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
99% of the landlords were happy. If we had a landlord that wasn't that happy, we just didn't work with them anymore.
Yeah.
But 100% of the tenants were happy.
Correct.
So what happened was our retention just went through the roof.
Yeah.
No voids, less empty rooms.
Tenant
turnover went from months into 1.x years, so the tenant turnover doubled. Everybody was happy, and what we did is turnover reduced, so it probably doubled in the extension of time. Tenancy length doubled. But we just solved everyone's problems, and what we did is we took responsibility and ownership of the situation.
Yeah.
We didn't say, oh, it's a tenant's problem or the landlord's problem or admin problem. We just said, we're going to fix all of your problems.
Yeah.
And that was the game changer when we had that mentality that it was about finding solution,
Yeah.
not going for all of these approvals.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think there's so many traditional, fortunately I've never worked in a traditional agency, but I can see how they operate and I've rented from them. And you are right, they follow a very rigid sort of, we can only do this, the landlord said no, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, at the end of the day, look, these issues need to be sorted. So, I mean, yeah, just to take it a step further, like how many times have we've given feedback to a landlord saying, you need to redecorate the bedroom. Because one, no one wants to rent it. It's too scruffy as it is. It's, you know, it's an older property. It's tired, whatever. You need to redecorate it and put in some new furniture. You'll rent the room quicker and you'll rent it at a higher rate. But the landlord's based in Hong Kong or Australia or whatever, and I know because I've been a landlord based abroad, and it's like, well, you take in an agent's word for it, and even though you know them and you trust them, it's like, oh, do I really want to spend the few £100? Can't they just rent it? And as a landlord, based on the other side of the world, you just kind of go to bed ignoring it, hoping that they were wrong and hoping that it will just fix itself. But it doesn't just fix itself. So what we do is we just paint the room ourselves, and then we say, I've had this conversation many times. I say to the landlord, look, if you're not prepared to do it, I will do it. I will pay for the rent. I'll pay for the painting. I'll do it. I'll just do it, and then we won't charge it until we start collecting the extra rent. So we solved the problem.
But we also solved an admin problem.
Yeah.
Because you didn't
So
have to get the money.
things done quicker.
It was cash flow.
Yeah.
Job done. And then
putting your money where your mouth is. I think that's the thing.
And then the yields go up for the landlord.
Yeah.
The void periods go down. The landlord's better off.
Yeah.
We've got less hassle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for anyone who wants to do that, good luck to them. Because what you have to do is work a 7-day-a-week operation. Answer the phone all the time, reply all the time, be there for the tenant. So you end up becoming like a cross between a hospitality sector and an agent sector.
Yeah.
But it's back to the willingness to just go above and beyond and always say yes.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, a HMO stands for House of Multiple Occupation. So by definition, it's 3 or more people from 2 or more households. And there is a bit of bad press about them. And you can see why, because like anything, if it's not well managed, and some of them are not, if they're not well managed, then obviously it can cause issues. But the obvious thing is, let's say, for example, in a really densely populated...
It's not just bad press in general about being a landlord or if you don't manage?
Yeah, well, I mean, to a degree, but I think the reason why HMOs are kind of liable for extra scrutiny, I suppose, is because you're increasing the number of people in the house, and subsequently, if you've got multiple HMOs, the street. So, parking can be an issue if you've got too many people living on one street. The waste disposal can be an issue. But also, if your tenants are disrespectful, then they can be disrespectful to the neighbours and littering and things like that. But I'm always an advocate.
Just volume, really.
Yeah, it's volume. Yeah, I think so. And the quality and how well they're looked after. Like I've been into some HMOs where they're just not safe. Like they're just not safe. Like a HMO has much more extra fire safety regulations than just a family house. Like you got to have fire doors and alarm systems and emergency lights and all that sort of thing. And they have to be adequate, functionable, and serviceable. Doors and systems and whatnot, and some of them just are not. So, yeah, I guess for that reason, councils kind of are cautious about. Well, no, they're not cautious. Like they're in our lives. Like it's part of. And the thing in the UK is obviously the population.
But the rules and regulations are there, aren't they?
They're all there. Yeah, they're all there. But it's an affordable living solution. So, for example, our rooms on average are roughly £500, give or take. That's a very general number across the city. But that's including all the bills. So for a tenant who's moving into the city, they don't know anyone, they don't want to go through the hassle of setting up all their utility bills, and they can't afford to rent an apartment, which is $650. Or a house, $650, $850 plus all the bills. They move into an HMO and they've got £500 all inclusive. They walk in with their suitcase and they just start cooking on the first night because all the pots and pans are in the cupboards. And then also, they've got 3 or 4, 5, 6 friends who are all like-minded, because we only put like-minded people together, and then they've all of a sudden got like a network of friends, which in fact actually, kind of to go off track a little bit, this is one of the biggest things as to why they move into these houses, professionals anyway, is because it's the social element. So me and a couple of guys from the office took a whole bunch of our tenants out for lunch one day, and we just wanted to get feedback. And we found out that price was not the most determining factor why they choose a particular room. The area wasn't the most determining factor. It was who they're living with. That was what it was. They wanted to live. It was the social element, because most of them are moving to the city, or they're moving out of student halls and they don't know anyone. Their student friends have moved away, or they've gone back home, wherever that is. So they're in the city and they want social life. So that's the biggest part of it. So I think, yes, they do get a bit of a bad rap here and there. Some of it is justified. A lot of it is just the press being the press. But there is regulations around controlling the numbers of them. And I think, yeah, I mean, the council, I don't really want to speak too much about the Liverpool City Council, but I think they're quite good to deal with in terms of getting things done. But in terms of their view on policies, can't really comment. But in terms of in terms of getting things done, they're quite reasonable. I know some councils are not particularly easy to deal with when it comes to HMOs, but we have had a legislation change in 2021, which basically restricts your ability to be able to just convert houses into HMOs. You used to be able to just take a house and convert it into an HMO, whereas now you can't just do that. You have to go through planning, and it's a bit more of a longer winded process, and it's much harder to get. So basically, the long story short is the amount of HMOs in Liverpool is not likely to drastically change up or down.
Is that because of restrictions?
Yeah, because
What about supply and demand?
Well, the demand is going up because the supply is staying more or less the same, but the demand for the rooms for students and working professionals, so we cover both markets, the demand for both of them is going up. So because you can't create any more HMOs, but the demand's going up, obviously the rent inevitably is going up. So the only ones who are losing out really is the tenants, who are having to pay the higher rent. But then I guess the local neighbours are probably glad that there's not more being created.
So we've distinguished how great managing agents we are.
Yeah.
But also not to forget that we're both entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
We're always looking for new angles. And recently we started a new venture called Asset Brokers.
Yeah.
And we talked about how seamlessly our friendship and business relationship has gone. But the next business is absolutely a phenomenal story of how I think we'll go into it now. But I think we did the deal. We agreed the deal on the first day, and Asset Brokers was alive and trading within about 4 weeks.
Something like that. Well, I mean, incorporate the company and we were off, basically.
Yeah, so and I guess the point of this story, to anybody wants to get the point to this story is, again, if you've got someone who you connect with, say the right things, hasn't got too many demands, just wants an opportunity, and you go with your gut, it doesn't always work. Yeah. But yet again, you made the right decision calling me. Yeah. And you read them. I
didn't just call you. I said, "Cool. What are you doing on Friday? Clear your schedule," which I've never done before.
Yeah. So that was actually the only time you've always sent a nice request. But so tell everyone about Asset Brokers and how it came about.
The message wasn't quite like that, was it? But yeah. So basically, to quote the phrase you said earlier, "Seize the day" is something obviously you do very well when your gut tells you to. So basically, the Asset Brokers came about because I had a longer standing relationship with our MD, Lindsay. Lindsay was working for a HMO sales agency a number of years ago, and we used to sort of collaborate quite a bit. So I'd pass her buyers and properties and vice versa, and she'd pass me property to manage and so forth. She ended up selling some of our HMOs and our clients' HMOs. But how it really came about, how I really got to know her was we had converted a hotel. It was the biggest HMO conversion we'd done at the time. And the sale price was about 650 grand. And my day-to-day investors were not looking at for anything at that level. So I was trying to sell it for a few weeks, and I just wasn't getting bites. So I brought in the big guns, Lindsay. And basically, she got the deal agreed with the buyer. Don't quote me on the time frame, but it wasn't long. We're talking like a few weeks, she found a buyer. Mm-hmm. And but what struck me was, I'd be driving around Liverpool, viewing properties, meeting landlords, whatever it might be. And just as I'm thinking, I wonder where the sale's up to. Caller ID, Lindsay, yep, just to let you know, the sale's here. It's doing this, we're doing that. And every time, before I even pick up the phone, she's phoning me to tell me where things are up to. Communication. And I'd never, ever had that from an agent, ever. Whether you're buying or selling, you're always chasing the agent, you're chasing the solicitor, you're chasing the surveyor. But no, Lindsay's coming to me before I could even pick up the phone. So that really stood out. And then, to cut a long story short, I knew she was, due to some sort of personal, unfortunate and sudden personal an issue, she was just temporarily out of work. So I reached out to her and just to touch base, because I always wanted a solid sales solution to support my landlords at Now Rooms. I was always helping. I was doing sales behind the scenes, selling off market and things like that. But all my landlords needed a buying and selling solution inevitably, because at any point in time, they're probably likely to buy something else or sell one of their properties. So I always had a bit of a gap that I was trying to plug, and I was trying to do it myself. But I needed to put something more solid in place. So that's why the solution about Lindsay. So I reached out to see if she just wanted to help with some sales progression. Long story short, we had a good catch up. We've always had a really good relationship, me and Lindsay. So I said, look, I tell you what, come to Liverpool, meet my business partners. And I wasn't actually trying to force anything. I didn't even think of anything at the time. I just said, look, just come to Liverpool, meet them, they get to know you, you get to know them, and then sort of, I was thinking bring her into the fold in one way or another, and she can just sort of start working with us, and it'd be good for her, it'd be good for us. Because she was itching to get going. She'd had time off, she needed the time off, but she was ready to get back in and dive in. So I think I phoned you up and said, look, it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
You said to me, we need to meet this girl and we need to meet her this week.
Yeah, I said, she's coming to Liverpool. What are you doing Friday? I need you to clear your schedule. Yeah, you need to meet this girl, which I've never done before. Like, I'll never just tell you to clear your schedule, but I did, because I knew what was on the table. Lindsay comes to town, and the way she describes it, it was like Liverpool's version of Dragon's Den. I didn't quite see it like that, but I suppose it was, because everyone was just basically quizzing her.
Yeah, Lindsay comes in,
about
sits
her
down.
experience. So she comes. She comes in. You might need to take over here, because my recollection is she comes in.
Yeah, just in case you don't do it justice.
Yeah, you go ahead.
She comes in.
Yeah.
She sits down, bubbly, smiley, and just tells us about her history and what she can do, and what pipeline she has. And I'm used to people coming to me and telling me how they're worth, their idea is worth this, and their network is worth this, and they're just worth, always adding a few zeros on what they believe they're worth. She came in telling us about all these opportunities she's got, and not saying about anything that she's worth. And I says to her, well, what would you like to achieve out of this conversation? And she just said an opportunity, like a job. And so I says, well, if you wanted a job, how would it look? And she says, well, I'll bring the clients, I'll do the negotiating. I've got the pipeline. I'll bring the money, and I'll bring. And she kept listing all these things that she'd bring to the table. And I says, what do you need us to bring? And she says, well, I don't really know. I just need you maybe to support me. I'm a little bit nervous. So I said, it doesn't sound like a job, does it? Sounds like, you know. So I says, what would you like? And she says, I don't know. And I remember thinking, if there's somebody standing in front of me now that's going to actually bring everything that you need for a successful business, and she's completely open to suggestions, that's definitely someone that hasn't got, you know, someone that's definitely a team member and not somebody that, you know, overvalues herself.
Yeah.
So we sat there, and I says to her, you've got a deal? And she's like, what's the deal? I says, you're not working for us, you're a business partner. And then I said to you, as long as Brett's okay with this, I reckon we'll just be equal business partners. We'll fund you, we'll get you going, we'll support you, and if you can deliver everything you say, this could be one of the greatest finds in a long time of a business partner, someone that we could, and of a business partner, someone we can rely on, someone that, you know, is a true partner. And that's a story that we can go on to another time, but what has come out of that has been absolutely phenomenal. The success story between asset brokers in the first year is something that you could write a book on, something you could teach people. And that's down to teamwork, loyalty, looking after your clients, just doing the right thing in with passion, caring about looking after your clients, making sure that from A to Z everything's looked after and nobody has to chase you. But so there's so many businesses now we are involved in Liverpool. I'm an adopted Scouser, you're an adopted Scouser. For me, there's just something about the city and the people that I've met, and I know we've met along the way, that has just attracted us here. And I think we're going to be here for a long time.
Yeah. Well, I was here for 2 years. It's coming on, well, it's been 8 now, so, and I'm not leaving anytime soon. So I say, I mean, Liverpool pride, it is a real thing. I'm always saying it. And especially, I mean, you can't, it's a very hard city. Like there's no people on the planet prouder than Scousers of their city. And you kind of, I remember thinking, there is something different about the pride of the people about their own city. They live in the greatest city on earth. They all say it. And then you realise, like, you kind of do, because if everyone believes it, well, then who's to say?
Well, it must be true.
Exactly. So I was like, you know what? There's merit to that. And then and then we were sitting down one night with Dave, and he said about the documentary Two Tribes. So I went and watched that, and that kind of put into perspective a bit about the history. I knew a little bit about the history, bits and pieces of the history of Liverpool over the years, but that documentary really kind of summarised for me, like, kind of all the ups and downs the city's been through, and it just goes to show that is really why there is so much character here. You know, character, and the culture is so strong. And how I landed on Liverpool was partly that, but mainly property. So when I was living in London, I did research. I wanted to build a cash flowing portfolio. I was looking to build a high yielding portfolio. So I was like, well, it's not London, it's got to be up north. So I did research on Hull, Sheffield, Leeds, Manchester, and Liverpool. And out of all of them, Liverpool was by far the strong, well, it ticked all the boxes, and it stood out as being by far the strongest city, because the property market was strong. The future economic growth looked very promising, and the culture was very, not saying much about the others, but the culture and it was just so strong. So it was a bit of a no-brainer, really. So talking about seizing the day, I came up from London. I had no intentions of moving here. I came up from London one weekend up to Liverpool, viewed half a dozen properties, went back to London and decided to move to Liverpool. The next time I came up to Liverpool, I was looking for apartments to move into. I found one, and then a month later I was up here, living here. Said goodbye to all my friends and whatnot in London, and that was in very end of 2015. My plan was I'd be in Liverpool, I'd take this pot of cash from America, and I'm going to go around and I'll meet all the estate agents and the builders in town. I'll get to know the market, and I'm going to build up some buy-to-let, some residential properties. 8 years later, I'm not leaving. And one, because the city's so exciting, the property market's so exciting, obviously the relationship we've been building and the businesses we've got going on, just, you know what I mean? And you're right. I think so many people, a lot of our tenants are the same. They can't leave. You move into Liverpool and you kind of just you stay. Like most people who move here, they stay, and I can see why. Like it's got a lot to offer. It's got a lot to offer. Yeah, especially the restaurants. Like every day, there's a new restaurant popping up. We live in town, obviously, right near each other. So within walking distance, there's restaurants everywhere. So if you like eating out and,
Well, you're never lonely. If you walk down Liverpool, I struggle to get down Bold Street without someone saying hello. So I am cautious now. If I tell someone I'll be 10 minutes, I always put the condition that I may be stopped on the way through town to have a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and that passion about, we've got a passion about life. The people of Liverpool are very similar to us. We've got a passion about Liverpool, and we've got a passion about our businesses. And I think that collective, whatever the economic forecast is, whatever other people think about the city or the country or the world we live in now, the common thing we have is that we just see the opportunity that's here, and we don't see the other things. We don't see, we're not living in a bubble. We do know that there is challenges out there, but we just see that so much opportunity exists that for me it trumps any negativity that may exist.
Yeah, the optimism for the future in Liverpool is quite high. Everyone knows that, as a city we're moving in the right direction and everything's leveling up constantly. So yeah, I think that enthusiasm and that morale is high, and it's contagious, and it's good to be a part of. Yeah.